Dumarami na ang may abilidad. Dumarami na ang may abilidad.
Para makatipid sa kuryente.
Imbes na incandescent, LED bulb. Imbes na incandescent, LED
Bili mo
bulb
ng appliances. Mataas ang energy efficiency rating. Mataas ang energy efficiency rating. Pag-auto.
Yung matipid sa gas.
Pag-auto.
Yung matipid sa gas. Nagka-carpooling ang mga magkakakilala. Nagka-carpooling ang mga magkakakilala.
Energy source. Abilidad natin magkakuryente. Abilidad natin magkakuryente. Energy ability.
For energy efficiency and security. For energy efficiency and security.
Konsumo ng kuryente, kayang konsumo ng kuryente. Kayang okay ang pag-off pag hindi gamit. Okay ang pag-off pag hindi gamit. Kuryente, pero sa pag-unplug, aircon, 25 degrees lang. Aircon, para lang hindi mainitan. Hindi pala hindi mainitan. Malinis ang electric fan. Hindi hirap ang motor. Hindi hirap ang motor. Sa pagpili at paggamit ng kasangkapan. Sa pagpili at paggamit ng kasangkapan.
I-power mo, i-safety mo, i-secure mo, i-discarte mo, i-secure mo, i-discarte mo.
Mataas ba ang konsumo sa kuryente ng aircon? Mataas ba ang konsumo sa kuryente ng aircon? Kaya yung pagpapanlaki. Kaya yung pagpapanlaki. Easy. Nag-e-aircon tayo para hindi mainitan. Nag-e-aircon tayo para hindi mainitan. Hindi pa ang hingin ninyo. Gusto lang ang ating mapresyohan. Hindi naman mga mapresyohan. Hindi naman konsumo sa kuryente ng aircon. Ang konsumo sa kuryente ng aircon. The more na under ito, the more the consumo. Kaya 25 degrees lang ang thermostat. 25 degrees lang ang thermostat. Ayos na. Hindi kailangan sobrang baba ng setting. Hindi kailangan sobrang baba ng setting. Tapos ang suot naman pagkakapal. Tapos ang suot naman hindi pagkakapal. Ang damit, dapat iyong maninipis. Dapat iyong maninipis. Kapag 25 degrees lang ang thermostat, kapag 25 hindi masyadong ayos na hindi masyadong ang aircon ko lagi ring malinis. Pag napapabaya ang malinis. Pag napapabaya ang mahihirapan ng compressor. Mahihirapan ng compressor. Nung binili ko pinili ko yung mas mataas na iina. Pinili ko yung mas mataas na iina. Para mas tandaan, konsumo sa kuryente daan. Kayang pababain. Konsumo sa kuryente. Easy-easy. Kayang pababain. Bayarin sa kuryente. Bayarin sa kuryente.
Sa paggamit ng aircon, i-diskarte mo, i-power mo, i-diskarte mo, i-secure mo, i-diskarte mo, i-secure mo, i-diskarte mo.
Good morning, everyone. Let us all bow our heads for the invocation to be followed by the Philippine National Anthem.
Our ever-loving Father, the core of every reason, the source of truth, the core of every reason, you who made the earth and the heavens, you who are the ultimate goal of every knowledge seeker, are the ultimate goal the infinite wisdom seekers, the cause of all that is good, the cause of all that is good. We are truly grateful for this opportunity. We are truly grateful to gather together as a community, to gather together the challenges we face each day. Despite the challenges we face, yet He remained and gave us strength. Yet carry on the responsibilities, to carry on bearing the responsibilities and using them for better purposes. And we now humbly ask you to join us in our endeavor to explore the wonders of life in the world for knowledge's sake, that in whatever we learn today, we become more grounded to you, who is truth, who is love. We pray that you bless our speakers, the fount of your infinite knowledge. We pray that they can share something worthwhile despite the limited time we have. That they can channel all they know and share to us despite the limited time, the beauty and truth of living as they can channel all they know and share. We pray that you guide our participants, the seekers of your boundless knowledge. We pray that they may continue to persevere in the search, the seekers of your boundless knowledge, and be deemed worthy that they may continue to persevere in the search, and be deemed sanctify us, O Lord, not because we are worthy of it, but because we believe in your love and mercy, that at the end of the day, we can take home something that's amazing and meaningful. This we ask and pray through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Welcome to the 2022 Virtual Energy Investment Forum. I am Maxine Imperial from the Investment Promotion Office of the Department of Energy, and I will be your host for today's event. Again, a warm welcome to all our guests, partners, prospective energy investors from all over the country and all over the world. By this time, I think everyone has already explored our virtual venue, including the program schedule, photo booth, networking lounge, and the resource hub. If not, you may do that later. So, to officially start this program, may I call on the head of the Investment of Promotion Office, Miss Lisa Go, to give us an overview, and we'll proceed with the introduction of the keynote speaker.
Thank you, Maxine. Good morning, everyone. This Energy Investment Forum started way back in 2004 in Manila and eventually evolved into an annual event in Visayas and Mindanao as well. Our main goal is to primarily provide our stakeholders with the latest developments in the energy sector to further encourage more investments in the country. Today, we are fortunate to have with us an excellent lineup of distinguished resource persons from the Department of Energy, Energy Regulatory Commission, DTI's Board of Investments, from the banking sector, the Development Bank of the Philippines, and Banco de Oro Capital Investment Corporation, and our partners from the private sector, First Gen Corporation and ASEN Corporation. So we enjoin everyone to stay until the afternoon sessions and interact actively during the open forum. At this point, it is my honor and privilege to introduce our keynote speaker. He is not new in the energy industry. He has served in government more than 20 years in various sectors, professor of law in the University of the Philippines, undersecretary at the National Economic and Development Authority under 3 presidents, president and CEO of the Power Assets and Liabilities Management Corporation, legal consultant to several Senate presidents and senators. He also served as regional program director of a regional seas project funded by the Global Environment Facility and implemented by the United Nations Development Program. He is currently in his second stint as Secretary of Energy. Let us all welcome our very hardworking Secretary of the Department of Energy, Secretary Rafael Lutilla.
Maraming salamat, Tisa, at mabuhay sa ating lahat. We are gathered virtually for this Energy Investment Forum. The Department of Energy, through its Investment Promotions Office, has been conducting it regularly to provide both prospective and existing investors updates on the energy situation and power outlook, including recent policies, the energy regulatory framework, and financing facilities available that may firm up or further intensify your investments in the energy sector. It also serves as a venue to interact with our energy stakeholders and gather insights from our partners from the private sector on their challenges in implementing energy projects. From these inputs, we will aim to further improve our services and align our policies to ease doing business in the energy sector. Let me just give you a glimpse of our energy situation and power outlook, since I understand this will be discussed in detail later by our planning and power bureaus. Our country's total primary energy supply, or the energy mix by fuel type in 2021, reached 51 million in tons of oil equivalent. This was mostly sourced from imported fuels at 56.8%, while around 42% came from indigenous or domestic sources. We continue to use a significant amount of fossil fuels, and these altogether account for 77.2% of the total 77.2% of the total primary energy supply. Coal dominates the energy supply with a share of 37.1%, followed by oil at 34.6%, and natural gas at 5.5%, but declining character of Malampayar only producing field. While renewable energy sources account for 22.8%, mainly sourced from wind, solar, biofuels, and hydro. Consequently, coal, renewable energy, and natural gas power plants remain a significant part of the country's power generating supply. Now, let me share with you our recent policies and thinking on a number of points. First, on renewable energy, the sector is now open to 100% ownership based on a recent opinion by the Department of Justice. The opinion accelerates the attainment of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s programs to develop the country's indigenous and renewable energy. We are currently preparing the amendments to the implementing rules and regulations of the Renewable Energy Act of 2008 to conform with the DOJ's opinion. In addition, the renewable energy portfolio standards were increased from 1% to 2.52%, which will increase the utilization of RE in on-grid areas. Furthermore, the qualified and registered renewable energy generating units can now enjoy preferential dispatch in the wholesale electricity spot market. We are also continuously looking into the policy framework for specific renewable sources to take as there is no one size fits all. We also need to take into account the latest global experiences and best practices and ensure the effective development of each renewable energy resource for the Filipino people. This is true whether it is for established RE like geothermal or emerging ones like offshore wind. As I stated, we are also cognizant that at present we need all the generation assets we have to provide power to our people. Accordingly, we have requested the lowering of import tariffs on coal to zero permanently. The DOE also coordinated with the Bureau of Customs for the tax rate to be levied on imported coal for power generation to be computed based on transactional value instead of a reference value. We hope that with this adjustment, the minimum cost reduction when compounded will contribute to the lowering of electricity rates and therefore beneficial to all of us as consumers. On the upstream and oil and gas sector, I'm pleased to note that the government's commitment to preserve and maintain the investment incentives for service contractors under PD 87 has been met with renewed confidence and strong interest by local and foreign investors in the oil and gas sector. As you know, we allowed recently Nido Petroleum, the operator of Service Contract 6B and Service Contract 54, to proceed with the site survey of their drilling locations in their service contract areas by the last quarter of this year. As you may recall, the DOE also approved the sale of Shell's 45% in the Malampaya Service Contract 38, Prime Infrastructure Capital Incorporated, after a thorough review in accordance with PD number 87. The new entrant is committed to maximize the utilization of the remaining natural gas in the Malampaya Camago Reservoir to develop the nearby gas fields. We see natural gas as a transition fuel to a low carbon future. I am confident that this trend will continue as we reaffirm to prospective investors the openness of our economy to foreign and local investors and assure them of the continued stability of our legal framework, especially in the upstream oil and gas sector. As one of the measures to reduce electricity demand, we have also intensified the drive to encourage energy efficiency and conservation measures among government offices, private companies, and local government units to help reduce and manage electricity consumption. We are also aggressively pursuing the development and adoption of alternative fuels and emerging technologies to reduce our dependence on imported fuel, especially in the transport sector. We have also rolled out the Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop to allow online submission of applications in DOE, initially for renewable energy and power projects. Other agencies and entities are also on board, such as the National Power Corporation, the National Electrification Administration, National Transmission Corporation, Department of Labor and Employment, National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, Department of Justice, and the Independent Electricity Market Operator, as well as the local government of Bai Laguna. We are working nonstop with other concerned agencies to fully provide a one-stop shop in the entire energy sector. Finally, I wish to stress the President's marching orders for us at DOE and our partner agencies in the government who have responsibilities for making sure, for ensuring the success of the energy sector, to guarantee a level playing field. This is the one that will attract investors to put their money into the energy sector in the Philippines. With these developments, we encourage investors to work with us in steering the energy industry towards a cleaner, greener, reliable, and more sustainable future. So I look forward for you to have a meaningful discussion with the DOE team led by Undersecretary Felix William Fuentebella and Lisa Go. And I hope that the private sector and all our stakeholders will maintain their enthusiasm for this continuing dialogue and consultation. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat po sa ating lahat.
Thank you, Secretary Latilia, for update on the energy sector, which will certainly pave the way for the entry of more investments. You really have been working fast and quickly mobilized the energy family to institute the necessary policies towards the transition into a clean energy scenario for the betterment of our future generation. To enlighten us on the country's power situation and outlook, let me introduce to you our first speaker. She holds a bachelor's degree in statistics from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, and a master's in development economics from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. She has also managed multilateral and bilateral funded projects in the Philippines Department of Energy. She was also the first representative of the Philippines in the Asia-Pacific Energy Research Center in Tokyo, Japan. Director Exconde has been working with the government for 30 years, including services at the National Statistics Office, National Economic Development Authority, and the Department of Energy. She is currently the OIC Director of the Electric Power Industry Management Bureau. May I please invite on screen Director Irma Exconde.
Okay. Okay. Sige. Yung screen. Okay. Okay, diba? Huh? You start, okay. A blessed, okay then. Okay. A blessed and joyful day, everyone. This is a good opportunity for us to present the power situation and outlook to our stakeholders and clients in this Energy Investment Forum. We all know how critical for the country to ensure that there is continuous and reliable power supply at all times to sustain the economic development and to provide uninterruptible electricity services in our homes, offices, and all electricity consuming sectors. And this is one of the major mandates of the Department of Energy. My presentation today, we have the following. First, power situation, particularly the basic data in the grid and off-grid areas, the major challenges we are facing for next year in the main grids, power outlook to 2040 based on the Philippine Energy Plan 2020 to 2040, which is geared towards sustainable and clean energy future. Finally, a summary of the power-related policies, empowering the consumers and promoting greater accountability and responsibility by the different electric power industry participants to achieve a competitive and level playing field that will result to least cost power supply to the consumers. Our power system distinguishes the grid those in blue shaded areas, and off-grid, the maroon shaded areas on the screen, since their issues and challenges differ significantly. Off-grid have limited supply options since they are not connected to the main grid. The installed and dependable capacities in the main grid were recorded at 27,044 megawatts and 24,112 megawatts respectively as of June 2022. In terms of the supply or capacity mix, it is clearly seen that fossil fuels remain dominant. The country's year-to-date peak demand is 16,568 megawatts. That's almost 5% higher than the previous year. For the off-grid areas, oil-based plants remain to be the major source of power supply at 89% of the capacity mix. There are 281 missionary and off-grid areas with total peak demand of 299 megawatts, which is only about 2% of the country's total demand. This next slide shows the power capacity mix of the country based on existing power plants. As of August 2022, the installed capacity is 27,790 megawatts. This is a little more than 700 megawatts higher than the June that I shown earlier, of which 71% are fossil fuel plants, that is coal, oil, and natural gas, while 29% are renewable energy, with hydro having the largest share at 13%, followed by geothermal at 7%, and the fast-rising solar at 5%, while wind and biomass are both at about 2%. We now move on to the power outlook scenario for 2023. We are already preparing for the contingencies for next year because of the challenges being faced by the power sector, such as the depleting supply of natural gas from Malampaya, the delays in the completion of the LNG facilities that will be the source of fuel of plants that have expired gas contracts with Malampaya, the delays in the completion of transmission projects that are expected to deliver all available capacities where they are needed. On top of all this is the continued high fuel prices in the global market, particularly coal, which has the largest share, both mix. Next slide shows the demand and supply assumptions for the Luzon grid for 2023. So you can go through it. I showed the assumptions to highlight the importance of having strict compliance to the DOE policy on the scheduled maintenance of the power plants, the synchronized and timely completion of the power generation projects and transmission projects, and the consideration of the natural limitations of hydro plants during summer period. The next slide shows the power outlook in 2023 for Luzon in terms of available reserve capacity, meaning the green bars represent the remaining capacity after the demand has been met by the supply, and the horizontal lines represent the different reserve requirement. Thus, if the green bar exceeds the black line, then there is enough capacity to meet all reserve requirement. However, if they fall below the yellow line, then NGCP will issue a yellow alert notice of the possibility of rotating brownouts. And if below the red line, then there will be notice of red alert and rotating brownouts will likely to happen. This scenario, using the basic assumptions shown earlier and reducing the power supply with the assumed forced or unforeseen outages, indicate that there will be adequate power supply in the zone grid. There will be no yellow or red alerts expected during the period. However, should Ilihan Gas Power Plant will not be able to deliver in time for summer period, then there will be occurrences of 17 yellow alerts and 3 red alerts in 2023. The red alerts are seen to occur in May and June, those are the peak months, as capacity will fall below red line. But rest assured that all concerned units in coordination with the project proponents are working together to have the project be completed based on the recent target. To improve the supply situation in the Luzon and avoid any red alerts, the transmission constraint from the Bataan power plants to the load center in Metro Manila should be addressed immediately through improvement of system operations to maximize available plants, and then the timely completion of transmission projects, which is targeted by December 2022, and assistance on specific project segments where the DOE needs to provide necessary interventions for the right-of-way issues and other government agencies' approval. With these measures, the additional 668 megawatt of GN Power Dihinin and other power plants in the pipeline in Bataan will be able to supply the needs of the Luzon grid. As I mentioned, the DOE, in cooperation with NGCP and Transco, are aggressively coordinating and making representations with other government agencies like DILG, DNR, and the judiciary, both at the national and local levels, to have the documentary approvals be issued soonest for the transmission projects to proceed and be completed. To complement the efforts on the supply side, there are already programs that are in place. In particular, Meralco has an existing program on time of use rate that encourages large users to move some of their electricity consumption from peak hours of the day to off-peak hours, wherein the power rate is relatively lower. Another one is the Interruptible Load Program, or ILP, which encourages those establishments or industries with self-generating facilities to use them during times when there is a notice of red alert. As such, the grid will be freed up some demand, thus aborting possible rotational brownout. The ERC has already an existing framework, including cost recovery of the ILP, that can be used by any distribution utility. For the Visayas, shown are the assumptions, and similar to Luzon, the completion of transmission projects are critical. The good news is that the listed projects here have already been completed and energized. Now, we'll show now on the next, for Visayas, that we have also two scenarios. For afternoon peak, when solar are available, and then evening peak when solar is not available. For the afternoon peak, there will be sufficient supply in the first half of 2023. However, in the second half, there are possibilities of yellow alerts. You may notice that there is the red bar on top of the green bar. It represents the standard generating capacity, while the uprating of the Cebu, Negros, Panay projects are not yet complete. For the evening peak, there will be tighter supply in the second half, so there'll be higher possibility of yellow alerts and even red alerts. However, please note that this representation has not yet considered that during evening, the Luzon grid has an excess capacity that can be exported to Visayas via the high voltage direct current. Thus, they could address those supply deficiencies to avoid power outages. As mentioned, the critical transmission project is the operating of the Cebu-Negros Panay interconnection, which is divided into three stages. Okay, stage one is the Negros Cebu interim, which is targeted to be completed this December. It is expected to provide an additional capacity of 85 megawatts upon its energization. Stage two is the upgrading of existing transmission system and development of new transmission corridor in Cebu, which includes high-capacity transmission line and new substation facilities to effectively accommodate the entire generation capacity of the new power plants. Stage 3 is intended to accommodate the transmission of excess power of about 800 megawatts from Panay and Negros Islands to Cebu and possibly the Luzon grid. The target completion is June 2023. Meanwhile, the Mindanao grid will still have surplus capacity for 2023, even after considering the possible forced outages or unforeseen outages. In case there are pockets of power interruptions in some areas of Mindanao, those are not supply availability issue, but possibly voltage problem, distribution facility problems, power supply contracting issues, or non-payment of obligations, or some untoward incidents. The implementation of the Mindanao Visayas Interconnection Project, or MVIP, will allow the export of excess capacities in Mindanao to the other major grids. The MVIP has an export capability of 450 megawatts. Once completed, the country is expected to benefit from more efficient use of available energy resources nationwide. Moving to the power outlook to 2040, shown on screen is the chart on the base case scenario of targeting 35% share of renewable energy in the power generation mix onwards to 2040. The red line corresponds to the country's annual peak demand. The black dashed line corresponds to the assumed 25% reserve margin. Gray bars represent the existing capacity. Black bars, the committed power projects, and the other colored bars on top of the light gray and the black bars correspond to the additional capacities or new capacity to be built. In this scenario, the total required capacity by 2040 will reach 91,000 megawatts, which include existing, committed, and new built capacities which is 4 times from the 2020 level at around 20,000 megawatts. Next slide shows the clean energy scenario with 50% renewable energy mix, renewable energy in the generation mix target by 2040. And since the target RE mix was increased from 35% to 50%, the resulting capacity by 2040 also increased significantly to 140 megawatts. And by 2040, there is a need to increase the Philippines' current capacity by about 5 times that of the 2020 level. Looking at the committed projects that are expected to meet the demand in the medium term, there is a total of 8,935 megawatts as of August 2022 report. Most of these are still fossil-based power plants, coal at 50% and natural gas at 39%. And to provide support and maximize the utilization of the variable renewable energy, there is 2,139 megawatts battery energy storage system. Most of them are expected to come on stream in 2023 to 2025. We are counting on the indicative power projects, which are at different stages of project development prior to financial closing. There is a total of 48,248 megawatts, total indicative power generation projects. Meanwhile, for the battery energy storage system, it's 2,042 megawatts. As the coal moratorium remains, coal capacity is significantly reduced to only 3% of the total projects, while RE capacity constitutes the major share at 82%. Natural gas share in the indicative capacity is at a lower 13%. Based on this information, developing the country's renewable energy source potential is definitely a key to have sustainable power supply in the long term. Significant progress in the natural gas industry is also necessary to meet the large additional capacities and support flexible and sustainable power generation that will complement the renewable energy. We are also reiterating the synchronization of the completion of the infrastructures in the whole power supply chain, the generation, transmission, and distribution. Policy and regulatory support must be firmly and effectively put in place to achieve the targets and advance the developments in the country's electric power industry. Towards attaining the sustainable and clean energy future, we have already laid down the supply policies and market development mechanisms. First is the prosumers. The DOE has worked on empowering the consumers to become prosumers, or consumers and producers at the same time, through the issuance of the guidance that enabled the non-issuance of RE contracts for RE projects intended for own use or for non-commercial uses. Awarded own use project reached 48 with potential installed capacities of 8.23 and almost 193 megawatts respectively. Through the net metering program, end users can install up to 100 kilowatt RE systems to reduce their electricity bills and sell the surplus to the grid. On the customer contracting options, I already mentioned earlier the ILP, which is available to all distribution utilities and their customers with gensets. And then the Green Energy Option program, which is the GEOP, which is a voluntary policy mechanism allowing consumers with 100 kilowatt and above demand to source their electricity supply for RE suppliers. And then the retail competition in open access, or COA, which allows qualified electricity end users or contestable customers to choose their electricity supplier at an agreed contract price. Currently, those whose demand is at least 500 kilowatt can already choose their power suppliers. DOE also have a policy for directly connected customer, which are the industrial or bulk electricity end user, which is supplied through the grid or transmission, or sub-transmission rather. The privilege of direct connection shall only be afforded to high demand, energy-intensive electricity end users wherein their distribution utility cannot meet the required capacity and quality of supply. On the grid and maintenance, it was mentioned earlier on the outlook assumptions about the compliance to the maintenance schedule. This is covered in the Grid Operating and Maintenance Program, or GOE policy, to ensure grid security and reliability. The GOMP contains the optimal combination of the 3-year maintenance schedule of the power generation and transmission facilities to ensure that there is enough capacity to meet the demand and reserve requirement. The policy considered the seasonality, thus only hydro plants are allowed to conduct maintenance during peak quarter of the year. And then on the distribution utility contracting, all distribution utilities are mandated to go through the competitive selection process or CSP in securing a power supply agreement through a transparent process as stipulated in the DOE CSP policy in order to provide the least cost power to the consumers. CSP exemption is given to the generating plants that are embedded in the distribution utility, utilizing the indigenous energy resources in the franchise area of the DU, of course, subject to ownership and market share limitations as provided under relevant laws and issuances, unless it intends to sell power outside of embedded area, in which case it shall undergo CSP with respect to its excess power. The size of generation plants shall have a maximum capacity of 10 megawatts for Luzon, DU, and then 5 megawatts for both Visayas and Mindanao distribution utilities. On the SO system operator contracting, NGCP as the system operator is mandated to ensure grid security pursuant to the Ancillary Services or AS policy. And the DOE is strictly enforcing the implementation of the AS policy to ensure that the NGCP fulfills its commitment to provide enough levels of ancillary services given the increasingly important role that reserve capacity plays in preserving the reliability and sufficiency of the power grid. And finally, the DOE support for RE development. The implementation of Green Energy Auction Program introduces greater competition among RE developers and generators and assists them in mitigating market exposure and risk related to renewable projects, and thus easing the effect on cost. It also facilitates economies of scale due to the aggregation of energy requirements based on renewable portfolio standard mandates. Assistant Secretary Mylene Kapongkol will discuss later the details of the JEA. In all this, we should note the need for timely completion and operation of the transmission and distribution facilities, and the need for investments and utilization of smart grid facilities as we move towards the digital era. In all power-related policies, the DOE is closely working with the Energy Regulatory Commission to ensure that the policies and regulations are harmonized and will be implemented accordingly and successfully. Before I end this presentation, please be informed that the details of the list of existing power plants, the committed and indicative power projects, and copies of the policies discussed are downloadable at the DOE website at www.doe.gov.ph. And yes, of course, we have presented to you the realities and challenges of the present, the works underway to achieve the future that we are envisioning. So we call for the support and cooperation of everyone, from the energy family and Energy Regulatory Commission to the industry, energy industry players, other national government agencies, local government units, financing institutions, civil society, and local and international development partners. With that, we can achieve our vision of a sustainable and clean energy future. Maraming salamat po at God bless po sa ating lahat.
Thank you, Director Exconde. We are now all enlightened about the country's current power situation and how the Department of Energy will assure that the country will be transitioning into a clean energy scenario. One of the key drivers for energy investments is the regulatory framework. So, to provide us with the updates on the energy regulatory framework, our next speaker holds a bachelor's degree in communication from the University of the Philippines, took up her Bachelor of Laws from the University of the Philippines College of Law, Masters of Law from the University of Michigan Law School, a lecturer at the University of the Philippines College of Law, professor at the Ateneo de Manila School of Law, chairperson of the National Renewable Energy Board. She was also the president and CEO of Enawa Asia, and she was also a partner and co-head from Energy Practice Group of the Puyat, Jacinto, and Santos Law, previously the Chief Legal and Compliance Officer of the Aboitiz Power Corporation, and she is currently appointed as the chairperson of the Energy Regulatory Commission. May I call on screen Chairperson Mona Lisa de Malanta.
Thank you, Maxine. Good morning, everyone. Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Salamat sa pagsama dito sa usapang ito on the Energy Investment Forum. We would like to thank, on behalf of the Energy Regulatory Commission, we would like to thank the Department of Energy in allowing us to be part of this very important exercise. Let me just to kick off this discussion. Can I ask if I can be able to share my screen? Can I share my screen from my end?
Yes, Attorney Yes, Attorney Dimalanta, you
Okay.
can share your screen now. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you all see my slides? Just want to confirm before I begin. Maxine, kita naman?
Yes, Attorney.
Thank you. Okay, so let's begin. This presentation covers 3 parts. So the first part is an introduction to the Energy Regulatory Commission for the benefit of those who are not yet familiar with the Energy Regulatory Commission. The second part, again, mainly for the benefit of those who are not yet familiar, are new investors or potential investors who would like to explore this very exciting, dynamic industry in the Philippines. But it's also an invitation to our suke, to our current investors who may want to see, together with us, who may want to see this industry in a new light. So the second part of the presentation is for both types of audiences. The third part is really for all. It will show us, and I hope to lay down for you, what you can expect from the Energy Regulatory Commission in support of the policies of the Department of Energy and our shared vision towards an energy secure, sustainable, and affordable power industry in the Philippines. So let me now proceed. The first part, just an introduction to the Energy Regulatory Commission. It is a commission that was established under the Republic Act 9136. It is established as an independent, quasi-judicial regulatory body to oversee the power sector in the Philippines. Why is this important? It's important because the ERC is not under the jurisdiction of the Department of Energy, contrary to what may be a misimpression from some people who are not familiar with the industry. We are independent, meaning we are not answerable to the Department of Energy. The commissioners, 5 of us, are appointed by the President of the Philippines, and we act on a quasi-judicial regulatory body. Next, what are the fundamental mandates? Under the EPIRA, or Republic Act 9136, there's a long list under Section 43 and several other sections of the law. But to guide us in understanding what the ERC really does, I'd like to present to you what we consider as our 4 pillars. We all know that Republic Act 9136 restructured the power industry in the Philippines. And the goal is to have a power sector that's private sector driven. So with the private sector driven generation sector and even distribution sector, what is important is to set the rules of the game. And that's what Secretary Lotilla mentioned earlier, that goal of setting a level playing field. So the primary mandate, or one of the primary mandates of the ERC, is to ensure that we promote competition. Government is no longer in the business of providing generation of electricity. So we need to make sure that we promote competition among the private players of this industry. The second fundamental mandate, and balancing that drive to promote competition, is to ensure that in that drive, in our desire to promote competition, we do not not only should we make sure that consumers are not getting the short end of the stick, but actually to make sure that all these efforts are still promoting consumer protection and still ensuring that the fundamental idea behind EPIRA, which is ensuring customer choice, that's why we are pursuing retail competition and open access, that customer choice is not only accessible, but can be practiced effectively. Meaning that consumers are not just given lip service in terms of that they can choose their suppliers, but in choosing their suppliers, in implementing their contracts, we need to make sure that consumers can effectively protect their right of choice to their suppliers. The third pillar, or the third fundamental mandate, is to continuously encourage development of markets, not just the physical market, but also the financial markets in the sector and any new markets that are created. And we see this already when the Republic Act 9513 was passed for the renewable energy sector. Now we are, as we pursue RPS, or Retail Portfolio Standard, we are creating also this market for RE certificates. So that's a new market, and the ERC is mandated by law to protect, promote, encourage that kind of new market. Finally, if there are rules in the game and some players are not playing by the rules, the ERC is also authorized by the Republic Act 9136 to penalize any abuse of market power. Abuses of market power can occur in different forms, can come in different forms, because we have different areas of the sector that are not maturing, progressing at the same pace. We still have natural monopolies, like the transmission sector and the distribution sector. And we have sectors that are, in a way, still at the growth stage, like the retail supply sector. And then we have a competitive sector in the wholesale spot market, for instance. So in all those growing, maturing sectors, we need to ensure that there is no player that's abusing their market power. If there is market power held by one or two entities only. So those are part of the mandates of the ERC. These mandates are exercised over what currently is a 630 billion peso industry, composed of more than 200 generation companies, almost 600 power plants in our system, one transmission concessionaire, but it's one, but this is among the natural monopolies that I mentioned earlier. It's one, but its expanse of operations covers more than 22,000 circuit kilometers of transmission lines. We also have currently about almost 400 participants in our wholesale spot market, trading on a daily basis at 288 intervals, because we currently have a 5-minute market. The ERC also oversees 142 distribution utilities of different types, because we have private distribution utilities and electric cooperatives, which have different structures, governance frameworks, and also level of access to capital, to financing, and also different levels of operations. We currently have almost 120 retail electricity suppliers. These are suppliers that can sell power directly to large customers, or what we call under the law as contestable customers. This is a new market, new area, new sector created under EPIRA. All of these players, the ERC watches out for them, making sure that they are playing by the rules, as I mentioned earlier. And what we look forward to is a realization of what the DOE already set out as the 2022 to 2040 Philippine Energy Plan in terms of the target investments. We are here to support and to make sure that we all realize an industry that's, I think maybe this target will be revised higher because of some changes that I think Secretary Lotilla also mentioned earlier, opening up to more investors. But we currently have set that target at a 7.6 trillion peso industry. So we are preparing for this, gearing up for the investments that will come in. So what is the mindset? What's the paradigm? And this is where the invitation already that I made earlier to new investors and current investors. What's the paradigm of the regulator when we see this industry? The industry currently has two sectors mainly: the competitive sector and the regulated sector. The competitive sectors, as I mentioned earlier, we need to just make sure that they play by the rules. Rate setting is exercised by the Commission on a very limited basis. And you will see in the generation on the upper left side of the screen, you will see that the rate setting function of the generator is only exercised in limited ways. One, in setting the feed-in tariffs as mandated by the RE Act, and in setting the rates in our off-grid areas via the National Power Corporation, which oversees our what we call our SPUG areas for missionary electrification, which currently enjoys subsidies under our rules. That's the extent. I'll explain later what may be most familiar to you as the tariffs under power supply agreement. That is not exactly a regulation under a competitive sector, but is an offshoot of the regulation over the distribution sector, which remains as a regulated entity. But overall, what we exercise over the competitive sectors are permitting requirements like issuance of certificates of compliance, which may be more familiar to others as permit to operate a facility. We monitor the market, and we enforce competition rules in the market. On the supply sector, it's also a permitting function generally, which make sure in which we make sure that we issue those licenses to those who continue to play by the rules, because there are conditions to those licenses. And we also exercise what the EPIRA had envisioned as the lowering of the thresholds for the open access and retail competition. On the lower part of your screen, this is really where the bulk of the work is for the regulator. We continue to oversee what I have mentioned earlier as the natural monopolies, the distribution and the transmission sector. This is the full gamut: rate setting, overseeing of their performance on systems losses, and compliance with the Philippine Grid Code and the Philippine Distribution Code, approval of bilateral power contracts. As I mentioned earlier, these are the contracts where they procure power on behalf of their customers. So this is not a business of the distribution utility, for example, on their own, but this is acting on behalf of consumers, captive consumers that remain to be supplied by the distribution utility. We also make sure that they file their capital expenditures and regulate the rates. So the rate setting function is exercised mainly over these two sectors. So as I mentioned earlier, I think I won't go anymore through all of these. The generation sector, the competitive sector, the generation rate setting is on a very limited basis. But this is where I want to perhaps for those who are not yet familiar with the sector, with the Philippine power sector, we have a functioning wholesale electricity spot market, very established now and very dynamic. The ERC set in a way the framework for the rates for our wholesale electricity spot market. Okay. I'm not sure if you can still see my screen, but okay. So we set what we call the price determination methodology, and we also approve the market transaction fees that are paid by, okay, wala ang aking share screen. Can you now see my screen again? Okay na po. Maxine, can you confirm? Nawala yata kanina.
I think ongoing, attorney, sharing po ng screen.
Okay. Sige, good.
Yes,
so
attorney.
you can share my screen. You can see my screen. Okay, so as I was saying earlier, the ERC also approves the PDM, what we call the PDM, the framework for and the mechanism for setting out the prices or settling the prices in the market, setting the market rates, prices, and the transaction fees that can be charged by the market to those who participate. We also set the rules on the distribution of what may occur as net settlement surplus under the market. Another important function in relation to the market is that it is not completely deregulated. Why? Because there are instances wherein the regulator can intervene and can declare suspension of the market and accordingly resumption of the market as well. We coordinate with the market operator and the system operator in case of situations where the ERC can suspend operations of the market upon occurrence of natural calamities or declaration of a national or international security emergency by the President pursuant to ERC Resolution Number 12, Series of 2018. During this period, there is what we call administered prices that are, so there is substitute pricing and administered pricing system that is in place, that will be in place using historical prices. These are imposed on areas that are affected by the suspension, by the market suspension. In the same manner, the ERC can also declare market resumption pursuant to the same resolution, which provides for certain conditions before the market can resume regular operation. Another thing that should be considered is that the market is, as I mentioned earlier, is not fully deregulated. There are caps that need to be observed and that are triggered once certain conditions are met. This is pursuant to the state's policy to protect public interest in areas affected by certain conditions. As a regulatory body, the ERC promulgated mitigating measures such as the offer price cap, currently set at what you see on the screen, negative 10,000 pesos per megawatt hour, and the upper part of the range is 32,000 pesos per megawatt hour. There is also a secondary price cap that currently operates, set at 6,245 pesos per megawatt hour to ensure that consumers are protected from unreasonable pricing or what can be anti-competitive pricing in the market. To date, the secondary price cap has been amended with a shortened monitoring period of 3 days. This considers the peak days already during which peaking plants are expected to run. As expected, over the last few months, we can see that the SPC or the secondary price cap was able to cushion the impact, operated as a cushion on the impact of sustained high WESM prices, not only for household consumers or what we call as captive customers, but also on industrial and service sectors that use electricity in providing output and services as part of the country's national output. In view of recent increases in coal and fuel prices triggered by global events, and following a letter of concern by the Philippine Independent Power Producers Association or PIPA, the 2021 SPC mechanism for additional compensation was already amended from just providing additional compensation to oil-based plants, but also to oil-based, natural gas, coal, and geothermal plants. For the regulated sector, we currently have regulatory frameworks for the transmission sector based on a performance-based regulation. We also approved their ancillary services contracts. Similarly, for the distribution sector, the regulatory framework is already on performance-based for the private distribution utilities and for a benchmarking methodology for the electric cooperatives. Recently, we have had several issuances in the Commission, but these are the issuances that have a system-wide effect. the approval of the feed-in tariff allowance for those interested in the RE space. There is a feed-in tariff allowance that's approved or that is set so that there is that amount that's collected from all consumers and then paid to the RE developers that are providing power in the system. We have also issued the amendments to the RTWR, or the transmission wheeling rate guidelines, so that we can pursue finally, after a long time, a reset of the transmission rates and get it up to speed and remove the uncertainties governing the transmission sector. And then moving forward, we are also doing the same thing for the distribution sector so that we can remove the uncertainties over the finality of the rates over these two crucial sectors in our industry. We are also, I think mentioned earlier by the Secretary and also by Director Exconde, the EVOS, very important tool in this sector to ensure that we are able to usher in quickly the projects into the system. The ERC currently have 7 processes that are already part of the EVOS. As seen in your screen. There are still processes that are not part of the EVOS, and these are mainly on the quasi-judicial functions of the Commission. Although they are not yet part of the EVOS, the intention of the Commission is to observe the timelines in the EVOS as much as we can. And so that's the first part, observe the timelines in the EVOS to the extent that we can. And if possible, move certain currently in the quasi-judicial functions to the permitting function so that they will form part of the EVOS. What is an example of this? Currently, we have point-to-point, what we call dedicated point-to-point applications covered by the quasi-judicial functions, meaning any application for dedicated lines need to be first applied with the ERC, published, a full-blown hearing is observed before the Commission can approve or can issue authority for the ownership of point-to-point lines. If we can transfer that to a permitting process and observe a much streamlined procedure for it, that will now allow what I mentioned earlier, or at least increase the probability that the 7.6 trillion peso investment targeted for more players in the industry, especially as we have more RE players in the industry, allow them to have better control over the timeline of their project development. So that's just one of the items that we are currently reviewing so that we can facilitate the realization of projects in the system. We are also aware, and now we're moving to the final part of the presentation, we're also aware that that the industry is evolving. In fact, the industry the energy system has already been evolving over the last decade or so. So from a unidirectional flow of electricity, we are moving towards a more decentralized distributed framework for the system. And what we want to ensure is that we're moving along with you. The regulatory framework is also moving along with you. It may take us a longer time, but that's where the momentum is. We're shifting our work towards a more decentralized, more distributed energy systems. And how do we plan to do this? We have set major targets for 2023, and let me just share about 5 with you. Just focus on the headlines maybe. So to equip us to deal with that decentralized, more distributed system, we are undertaking a restructuring of our agency so that we make sure that our personnel would be also equipped to deal with an evolving system. As I mentioned earlier, EVOS, we are focused not just on complying with what's already covered by EVOS, but further expanding it to what we still can do in our other systems. We are currently undertaking an ISO certification application that will be completed. And this is the exciting part. We are pursuing a digital transformation of our operations and processes. And this is really where I hope to learn also from our investors, so that we can proceed and you can share your what we call user experience with the regulator. The second target is to have a better definition of least cost pricing. For those who are not familiar, in the EPIRA, the goal of review, for instance, of bilateral power supply agreements is to ensure that there is least cost that whatever is passed on to our captive customers comprise of what's least cost. But what is least cost in the scheme of things? And over the last few months, especially with the increasing prices of fuel in the global market, this has really been challenged, this concept of least cost. Does it end is it complied with once the power supply agreement is approved by the regulator? Or is there a more dynamic, more prudent, more diligent understanding or appreciation of least cost? So that's an exercise that we are embarking on, that determination of what constitutes least cost. And in this exercise, we cannot do it without partnering with the Department of Energy, because the current system on competitive selection process is currently led by the Department of Energy. And that's really where the story begins, when the competitive selection process is undertaken. It doesn't begin, the determination of least cost does not begin and end when the PSA is submitted with the ERC. It begins much, much earlier. So we have to engage with the Department of Energy so that both agencies are aligned, that is the goal of the power procurement, that the goal is to get what is least cost. So how we set those filters along the line, that's something that we are working on with the Department of Energy. Of course, we continue to review and revise our framework for the remaining subsidy in our system, which is the universal charge for missionary electrification. We are pursuing, as I mentioned earlier, the resets for the distribution and the transmission sector. Third, we are also very much supportive of the quest for energy security, as I mentioned earlier. Aside from the support that comes from our permitting process, the second support that we give is also to increase reliability of current plants. We are reviewing the indices for power interruption duration and frequency and the reliability indices for NGCP, so that, of course, we are also reviewing the indices applicable to the generation companies. But we want to make sure that if the generation projects are there, those electrons can be delivered to the system. Because even if we have all the generation plants, all the targets for investment for generation in place, but there are no wires by which they can be delivered, or the wires are unreliable, then we are only then we face tragedies such as what we had faced in the Negros Island, where there are renewable energy capacities stranded because wires were not available to transmit them. The fourth target for 2023 is to adopt a framework, regulatory frameworks as necessary for new technologies. We work with the DOE hand in hand in developing this framework for offshore wind technology, for net metering for the off-grid sector, for our energy to pursue a more aggressively energy storage systems, for EVs, for electric vehicles. And in relation to the law that was passed last year on the microgrid systems, to establish the technical and service performance standards for microgrid systems. And maybe what I can add here, it's no longer on the slide because we hope to complete it by this week or next week at the latest, the framework for distributed energy resources, or the DER rules. We hope to publish that to issue that with finality by this week or next week. Finally, but more importantly, is the advancing of consumer empowerment. This is translated in full-scale implementation of the Green Energy Option Program, the net metering program, retail aggregation, and the updating of the green energy auction rates so that we're ready for the next round of green energy auction that will be launched by the Department of Energy. As I mentioned earlier, the DER rules for promulgation and the promulgation of the CREM rules, of the Competitive Retail Electricity Market rules, emphasizing on the licensing requirements and conditions for continued licensing of retail electricity suppliers so that we can make effective the choice of consumers as envisioned under the EPIRA. We also have for household consumers, we have implemented, although on a soft launch basis, the e-ticketing system for consumer complaints. So those are our targets that we want to share with you. Maybe in the next year, we can also update you on how we are progressing on these targets. So thank you very much, and I hope to still engage with you in discussions in the course of the day. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Chairperson Dimalanta. It seems it is a full steam ahead for ERC under your leadership. Another major aspect in investing in an energy business are the incentives provided by the government. Introducing our speaker, she holds a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from the Pamantasang Lungsod ng Maynila and an MBA from Ateneo de Manila University. She is currently the director of the Resource-Based Industry Service of the Board of Investments. To discuss the registration procedure for energy projects under the Republic Act number 11534, otherwise known as the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises, or the CREATE law, we have Director Raquel Echagüe from the Board of Investments.
Good day, everyone. On behalf of the DTI Undersecretary and BOI Managing Head, Dr. Seferino S. Rodolfo, I would like to thank the Department of Energy for inviting the Board of Investments, the investment promotions arm of the Department of Trade and Industry, to this virtual energy investment forum and be able to present how energy projects may qualify for incentives under the Republic Act number 11534, otherwise known as the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, or CREATE. I will be presenting salient features of the CREATE Act, the types of business enterprises qualified to avail of incentives under the Act, whether new or expansion. I will also present the recently approved 2022 Strategic Investment Priority Plan that listed down economic activities and projects entitled to the fiscal incentives under CREATE. Included in this presentation is the menu of incentives for all investment promotion agencies, or IPAs, that include the BOI and PEZA, among others, as well as the procedure for registration with the BOI and other IPAs. With the signing of the CREATE Act on March 26, 2021, and its effectivity on April 11, 2021, the government intends to make the investment climate in the Philippines significantly more attractive. The CREATE Act rationalizes, modernizes, and offers more relevant incentives to investors. The Act also reduced the corporate income tax, or CIT rate, from 30% to 25% for large corporations and down to 20% for the micro, small, and medium enterprises. Although the lowering of income taxes will lead to foregone revenues for the government amounting to over 100 billion pesos this year, the reform has put the Philippines in a more competitive position versus the corporate income tax rates of neighboring nations, and this has also allowed corporations to have higher net income after tax that hopefully can be channeled back to reinvestment to pump prime their businesses and the economy further. CREATE basically amended the incentives provisions of EO 226 or the Omnibus Investments Code of 1987 and other incentives laws of the country. The implementation of this act covers all investment promotion agencies, but they shall maintain their existing functions based on their laws governing them, except to the extent modified by CREATE. The law provides that BOI shall formulate the Strategic Investment Priority Plan, or the SIPP. This is done in consultation with the Fiscal Incentives Review Board, or the FIRB, other investment promotion agencies, the private sector, and other government agencies administering tax incentives. All IPAs will use and follow the same SIPP. CREATE provides for a new incentives regime for qualified projects, either new or expansion. The qualification of projects for registration is based on industry tier and location of the project. As all IPAs shall maintain their existing functions, approval or disapproval of incentives for projects with investment capital of 1 billion and below will still be within the powers of the IPAs, while those with investment capital of more than 1 billion pesos will be elevated to the Fiscal Incentives Review Board, or the FIRB. Under CREATE, a qualified business enterprise that may be registered by an IPA for purposes of incentives refers to any individual, partnership, corporation, Philippine branch of a foreign corporation, or other entity organized and existing under Philippine laws whose proposed activity or project is listed in the current IPP. CREATE, however, excludes service enterprises such as those engaged in customs brokerage, trucking or forwarding services, janitorial services, security services, insurance, banking, and other financial services, consumer cooperatives, credit unions, consultancy services, retail enterprises, restaurants, or such other similar services as may be determined by the FIRB. A business enterprise may register expansion of its existing facility if it involves installation of additional facility or equipment or infusion of additional investment that will result in increase in capacity of the same or similar activity within the same existing plant or facility and with additional benefits to the economy, provided that the proposed activity or project is listed in the current SIPP. Expansion projects include modernization and rehabilitation, resulting in the upgrade of the product or service. Registered expansion projects may be granted an income tax holiday incentive of 3 years. The Strategic Investment Priority Plan, or the SIPP, replaces the Annual Investment Priorities Plan of the BOI, but just the same, the SIPP is the country's investment plan containing the list of priority activities for investment promotion and facilitation supported through fiscal and non-fiscal incentives as provided in the CREATE Act. It categorizes activities into industry tiers such as Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Through Memorandum Order Number 61, signed by then-President Duterte, the 2022 SIPP was approved on May 24, 2022. It was then published in the May 27, 2022 issue of the Daily Tribune and was made effective on June 11, 2022. The implementing guidelines of the SIPP under Memorandum Circular Number 2022-007 was published by the BOI on August 12, 2022 in the Philippine Star and made effective immediately. Guided by the Ambition Natin 2040, the Pagtanaw 2050, the Inclusive Innovative Industrialization Framework, and other relevant government programs, the SIPP identifies industries and projects that will be eligible for fiscal incentives to attract high-value, modern, strategic, and sustainable high-technology projects that will strengthen our participation in the global value chain, create more jobs, and further sharpen the Philippines' competitiveness in the global market. The length of incentives that would be offered to corporations or investors will depend on their tier classification based on their levels of technology, as well as the location, with premium to those located far from urban centers. Tier 1 of this incentive scheme covers investments with high potential for job creation, value creation, and providing essential support to sectors critical to industrial development, as well as emerging industries with potential comparative advantage. This includes activities to address modern basic needs like essential goods such as food, medicine, and PPEs. Under this, we are also encouraging modern agriculture and manufacturing services, housing, energy, infrastructure, logistics, transportation, telecommunications, tourism, and export activities. Tier 2, on the other hand, includes the manufacture of supplies, parts, and components not produced currently in the country to encourage import substitution and address gaps in the domestic supply or value chain. Examples are integrated iron and steel projects, copper rod manufacturing. These also include green ecosystems like EV assembly, parts and its ecosystem, electronic device, smart grid and renewable energy, plus health-related infrastructures, defense-related industries, and food security-related activities. Tier 3 involves those that can accelerate transformation of the economy with the aim of global leadership in emerging industries. These are the R&D-oriented projects, advanced digital production technologies of the fourth industry revolution, robotics, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, additive manufacturing, and nanotechnologies. Tier 1 activities are those that were carried over from the BOI's 2020 Investment Priorities Plan unless they are specifically listed under Tier 2 or Tier 3. Tier 1 projects are further categorized into preferred activities, export activities, and special laws or mandatory listing. Except for export activities, most of these projects are undertaken by domestic-oriented enterprises. Shown here are the preferred activities. There are 12 industry listings here under the preferred activities, and 3 of which cover projects related to energy. I already highlighted in yellow those that are related to energy projects. But in particular, listing number 12, categorized or listed as energy, provides a separate listing for energy that covers power generation plants using conventional fuels, coal, diesel or natural gas, waste heat recovery projects, and the establishment of battery energy storage systems, or the BESS. Charging or refueling stations for alternative energy vehicles are qualified for registration under strategic services, while LNG storage and regasification facility and the pipeline for oil and gas may also qualify for registration under the listing infrastructure and logistics, including LGU PPPs. Export activities and special laws are also part of Tier 1. Export activities will be required to export at least 70% of total annual output to be qualified for incentives. Activities under the special laws are those that mandate BOI to include activities in the investment priorities plan for purposes of availment of the incentives. Of these 8 laws, under special laws, qualified projects covered by renewable energy, that number 6, and refining, storage, marketing, and distribution of petroleum products will not draw incentives under CREATE, as they have their own or their respective incentives provision under their own laws, which were not repealed by CREATE. Energy efficiency and conservation projects will draw incentives from CREATE. Tier 2 projects include the manufacture of supplies, parts, and components not produced in the country in order to address trade deficit and gaps and gaps in the domestic supply value chain. Tier 2 applications for registration shall be accompanied by an endorsement from relevant government agencies saying or stating that the project will address a gap in the domestic supply or value chain. Tier 2 includes 5 clusters of industries, among which is the green ecosystems that cover renewable energy, energy efficiency and conservation, and energy storage technologies. Since RE is also listed in Tier 1, proponents of RE projects may opt to be qualified under Tier 1 or under this tier, under Tier 2, depending on the attractiveness of applicable incentives to the project and the required endorsement to be made by the Department of Energy. Again, let me emphasize that RE projects under Tier 1 will follow the incentives package and rules under the Renewable Energy Law, while RE projects under this tier, under Tier 2, will follow and draw incentives under CREATE. RE projects under Tier 2 may include those renewable sources not defined under the RE law and those that are emerging like hydrogen fuel, subject to the endorsement by the DOE that the same will address gaps in the domestic supply or value chain. However, for energy efficiency and conservation projects, although these are listed in both Tiers 1 and 2, the projects will be evaluated based on Tier 2 listing, subject to the endorsement from the Department of Energy that the project will indeed address gaps in the domestic supply chain. And if the project is approved, it will be qualified for Tier 2 incentives. Except for battery energy storage system, which is listed under Tier 1, specifically under energy storage technologies will be qualified under Tier 2, subject to the applicable endorsement from the DOE. We very much welcome investment projects that will use modern, advanced, or new technology into the country. Such activities are classified under Tier 3. These involve those that can accelerate the transformation of the economy with the aim of gaining global leadership in emerging industries. These are R&D-oriented projects, advanced digital production technologies of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, robotics, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, chatbots, and AI-enabled IT BPM activities, additive manufacturing, and nanotechnologies. It also includes the commercialization of intellectual property and R&D products and services, medical devices, R&D hubs, science and technology parks, and innovation and incubation centers. Incentives such as the income tax holiday, duty-free importation of capital equipment, and the 5% special corporate income tax all redound to the benefit of the enterprises registered with the IPAs under CREATE. With these incentives, registered business enterprises may enjoy reduced operating costs, higher net income, shorter payback period, improved IRR and cash flow, allowing greater flexibility in operating decisions. The enhanced deductions on R&D, labor, training, and domestic inputs are incentives under CREATE to support companies that are innovating, hiring, and developing the skills of the Filipino people and are patronizing locally produced inputs. This will ensure that the registered business enterprises will continue to be competitive in terms of products offered and level of skilled labor. Likewise, the use of locally produced inputs will create a market for backward linkage, which in turn is expected to strengthen industry linkages and promote value chain integration. This may also encourage greater micro, small, and medium enterprises participation in the supply chain as producers of domestic inputs. The enhanced deduction on power expense offsets the high power costs in the country, while the deduction for investment allowance to manufacturing industry encourages manufacturers to reinvest their gains. Another enhanced deduction incentive is the depreciation allowance of the assets acquired for the entity's production of goods and services. Here is the matrix of showing progression of the duration of incentives based on location and industry tier. It shows that the higher the industry tier, the longer the incentives availment period. Note, however, that aside from the industry tier, the period of availment is also affected by the project's market orientation, whether it is export or domestic oriented, and its location, that is, the further away from NCR or the National Capital Region, the longer the incentives period. Note also that the 5% special corporate income tax or the SCIT is only applicable to export-oriented enterprises. To give an example, a power generation project using natural gas registered under Tier 1, serving the domestic market and will locate in Batangas and therefore would be covered or falling under all other areas, this project will be entitled to Tier 1 incentives with a total of 11 years of incentives. That is 6 years of income tax holiday, and after the income tax holiday, 5 years of enhanced deductions. Another example is an energy efficiency and conservation project qualified and registered under Tier 2, serving the domestic market and located in the NCR. This project will be entitled to a total of 10 years of incentives or 5 years of income tax holiday, and after which there will be 5 years of enhanced deductions. Note that metropolitan areas cover Metro Cebu and Metro Davao and other areas declared as metropolitan areas by NEDA or the LGU. The BI also has issued Memorandum Circular number 2022-002 on May 27, 2022, covering areas contiguous and adjacent to NCR. So in Bulacan, that will be Meycauayan City, San Jose del Monte City, in Cavite, Bacoor, Imus, and Dasmariñas. In Laguna, these are Binyan, Cabuyao, Calamba, San Pedro, Santa Rosa, and in Rizal, these are Antipolo, Cainta, and Taytay. This is the BOI registration process for energy projects. All energy projects will be required to secure an applicable endorsement from the Department of Energy. These include projects for energy or power generation plants using conventional fuels, renewable energy drawing incentives under CREATE or Tier 2, energy efficiency and conservation projects, energy storage technologies, and charging stations. The firm may apply with BOI by filling up the BOI application form, attaching the DOE endorsement and other documentary requirements. The proponent will give BOI time to checklist the application based on the form and the substance. For projects that are worth more than 1 billion pesos, BOI will require submission first of the 20-year financial projection to estimate the ex-ante cost-benefit analysis as required by the FIRB prior to official acceptance of the application. Under the Ease of Doing Business and Delivery of Government Service Act, BOI will act on the application within 20 working days. If the investment cost of the project is 1 billion pesos and below, final action on the project will be done by the BOI Board of Governors, and the applicant will be issued with a notice of board action. If the project was approved, the applicant will be given 90 calendar days within which to register the project. Otherwise, it will be considered withdrawn. For projects with investment cost of above 1 billion pesos and approved by the BOI board, it will be endorsed to the FIRB for action on the grant of the incentives under CREATE. The applicant will receive the notice of FIRB action once the FIRB has issued the corresponding resolution particular to the applied project. Upon filing of the application for registration, the proponent needs to submit these documents. These are the usual requirements, except that for energy projects, it will be required an applicable endorsement from the Department of Energy. The BOI application form or BOI Form 501 is downloadable from the BOI website. There should be an authorized representative by the proponent to whom the BOI would coordinate in relation to this application. A 20-year financial projection would be needed to help us estimate the ex-ante cost benefit of the project to the economy. Other usual documents are the SEC Certificate of Registration, Tax Identification Number, audited financial statement for the past 3 years if available, including the latest general information sheet. A business model that will identify revenue streams of the project is needed to validate under which listing in the SIPP will the project be qualified. We also need the firm's integrity pledge and the Google map showing the specific location of the applied project. Environmental Compliance Certificate or the ECC, or the Certificate of Non-Coverage or the NCC, if available, whichever is applicable to the project, will be needed prior to the start of commercial operation. However, if it is already available at the time of application, the proponent can submit it upon application. The SIPP may need other documents or information for a specific project or activity which will be required for submission upon filing of the application. Should you have questions related to your proposed project and other qualified energy projects under the 2022 SIPP, please do not hesitate to email yours truly at rb@boi.gov.ph. If you are now ready to apply or submit documents for checklisting as to form and substance, please email us at RBISPERD, that's rbsperd, @boi.gov.ph. The BOI expresses its gratitude to the Department of Energy and the participants for giving their valuable time for this presentation. Thank you and keep safe.
Thank you, Director Echage. We all know that financing is one of the determinants in the implementation of an energy project. So, we have invited resource persons from the commercial and banking sector to share with us their financing facilities. We have our first speaker. He holds a bachelor's degree in business administration from the University of the Philippines and an MBA from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. Lecturer at the Ateneo de Manila University Graduate School of Business and the University of the Philippines. Worked with other financial institutions in New York and Hong Kong. Board advisor of BDO Securities Corporation and chairman of Avion Holdings Corporation. He is currently the president and CEO of BDO Capital and Investment Corporation. Let's have on screen Mr. Eduardo Francisco from Banco de Oro Capital and Investment Corporation to tell us more on how energy investors could avail of BDO's financing facility.
Good afternoon. Good morning. Thank you very much for the introduction and for inviting me here. Anyway, I'm here to represent, I guess, the private sector because after me, our partners anyway in nation building from DBP will present. I understand, no? And then what's also great is that we have with us private sector investors from Mr. Giles Puna, who's a close friend, and of course from ASEN. So you'll get the whole experience. What I just wanted to share is a few slides anyway. Go to the next slide. Okay. Basically, just to tell you that we are really very supportive of the government's programs, from energy to roads to the other infra. But at least even in the energy space, we've been very, very supportive of sustainability efforts of the country and of the planet, because we believe that is the direction we should be going into. And that's why this slide just shows that we've had significant exposure or significant lendings already there. And in addition, of course, we also do the capital markets, and the capital markets also has some activities also that are not even counted here. Okay, next slide. What I just wanted to let your takeaway hopefully from here is that from the financial industry, and it's not just BDO, in fact, even DBP and Land Bank, because in fact, DBP and Land Bank are very supportive and they're actually able to help the smaller developers. We want to help you in your capital raising options and strategies, the roadmaps. If you haven't done so, we can try helping also in finding equity investors, because if you're a developer, sometimes it's very challenging and you really need to have a good partners with you to be able to make it more bankable. Of course, we know what is bankable enough and what is not, and that way you can always tweak your debt equity ratios and make it more bankable and look at the more realistic, let's say, amortization of your loans, and we can recommend if it's doable or not, no. And of course, we can arrange project finance loans depending on the size. I have a slide on that later on and have a sample term sheet. And in fact, what we have done for some of the corporates, for some of the clients, we started project finance loans, eventually refinance them in a more loose corporate-like structure, or even some cases we refinance it via the bond market, so that at least you keep your powder keg there, your bank lines free, so that you can use it to acquire more and build more projects. No? And of course, we can do IPO or trade sales. I'm fortunate that at least Mr. Giles Puno is here. From womb to tomb, we've been working with Giles. We've been their partner. So even for their IPO of EDC, and even for first gen, we were fortunate to have been working with them. Okay, next slide. So basically, just to give you an idea, at least when you think of banking, it's not just the loans. On the traditional side, you have the debt financing. We've also worked in the past with another client who tried to get ADB support for their studies, and you can go straight to them also. But then that includes also the financing for that, for getting the studies, helping in the equity, and helping some grant financing, especially in the case, let's say, for the first wind power project, we had DANEDA, DANEA, the Danish Export Credit Agency, supporting it. And then the other side, we can also get guarantees from PhilExim, from the other government agencies, even this subsidiary of ADB, that has a guarantee facility. We can do bonds, we can do blended finance, and of course, try to tap the specialized funds later on, whether ADB or IFC, to come in to invest. Next slide. What I just wanted to share with you here basically is a sample term sheet. But basically, if you want to do a project finance loan, that's our bread and butter. So we can arrange financing. Generally, our key financial institutions participating is BDO, but we can also bring in other banks depending on the size. Our single borrowers limit is significant already. It's around 60 to 80 billion. So hopefully that's enough for you guys with big projects. And then of course the tenor can be up to 12 years, and depends really on the project. If it's of course refinancing, it can be longer. But if it's depending also on the technology, it will be shorter if it's untested or if it's new. But generally, wind and solar, we've done a lot already. We haven't, of course, in the Philippines, we haven't tried yet offshore wind. We haven't done any, I guess, ocean yet, right? Of course, we've worked a lot with run-of-the-mill hydro. We've done wastewater. We've done, I guess, biomass and other projects. So we've had our fill of working on different projects, so we understand them. And of course, the security is standard in the project finance. Everything is assigned because there are step-in rights. No, next slide. So with that, I guess some rules of thumb. We don't do coal anymore. Of course, in fact, I think all of the banks don't really want to add more coal exposure. That's part of our commitment. And then just to give you some idea, and that's why it's also good that I guess Land Bank or DBP is here, because at least from the rule of thumb is if the project is small, it's hard to do it on a project finance basis because there's so many advisors you have to hire, so many studies you have to hire. It's easier just to get it done on a corporate-like structure, but that means you have to provide more guarantees or more, I guess, more collateral as opposed to just the plant. Because of course, generally the collateral values on the project finance renewable energy is usually less, and then the lands might even be leased, so there's not enough. But really looking at cash flows, no. And then another key rule of thumb is an offtake account. As of now, we don't like merchant. We don't like financing merchant, especially for because of the volatility. Of course, now, of course, it's expensive. I mean, you get good rate for WESM, but in the past it could also be very low. So our rule of thumb is we do 2/3. We want offtake contracts for 2/3 of your plant capacity. Why 2/3? So that at least it's enough to cover debt service. And then the 1/3, if you want to do WESM or some other thing, at least you can I guess trade on that or bet on that so that there's more upside and that goes to you. Okay. And then of course, in general, we prefer strategic investors as opposed to private equity or financial only investors, because we want people who really are there for the long run and with skin in the game. Okay. And I hope you'll appreciate that, because we don't want just somebody to invest and then flip and sell later on pag magka-problema, or pag magka-problema later on hindi man nila itutuloy. We want to be together in building the nation's resilience. No? Next slide. So with that, I think in fact, I'm looking forward to listening to the GEA presentation later on, because one of the things, of course, with feed-in tariffs already, I guess already being less for some depending on the technology, at least the GEAP is a way to get in. So we'd like to work with the developers or the sponsors to work on this to understand it more. Of course, the land use is one of the issue. Getting the land usage and of course the requirements are a challenge, and I hope there things can be done, because of course that's a significant amount of your collateral and of course your equity. So we hope that gets done. But anyway, at least if the government can simplify converting land from agri to industrial, it will be a win-win for everybody. Okay. The next slide is just basically my contact numbers are here, because of course we have a Q&A later on, but because of course with the great number of speakers who are all magagaling, I'm sure we won't be able to entertain most of all the questions. My email and cell phone there. because we'd love to talk to you afterwards, or you send me a text or an SMS, and well, we can talk. But anyway, we're here to support you. We appreciate being here. This is important for the country. We want to have more energy, and to the developers out there, please build it, and hopefully we'll get a chance to work with you. I guess my next slides are just hopefully my presentation will be available to everybody, but just to share with you some of the projects you're done. It's just for your information, but it doesn't have to be shown anymore. So with that, I pass it back to the moderator, and I look forward to the Q&A later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Francisco, for steering BDO to always find ways and contributing to the attainment of the DOE's goal to transition into a clean energy scenario. Introducing our next speaker, she holds a bachelor's degree in agricultural business from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, and an MBA degree from the Holy Spirit, Manila. She also holds a diploma in business administration and development from the Concordia International College in Vancouver, British Columbia, served as the head of the Facilities and Procurement Services of Land Bank of the Philippines, previously the head of the Overseas Remittance Business of the LBP, head of Lending Program Management Group, and she is currently the Senior Vice President of the Development Bank of the Philippines. May I invite on screen Senior Vice President Caroline Olfindo.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to share DBP's financing facilities for energy projects in this virtual energy investment forum. DBP espouses sustainable finance, and thus our focus are on energy projects that address climate change and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The supported energy projects that would reduce greenhouse gases are renewable energy, energy efficiency, including electric vehicle and green building, and waste to energy. The next slide will show the outline of my presentation. So please allow me to share about DBP and our financing facilities for energy project. And finally, I will provide a summary of my presentation. DBP is 100% owned by the Philippine government and is one of the premier development financial institutions in the Philippines. As a key player in nation building, our bank supports the development of the economy through the provision of much-needed financing resources to identified priority sectors for sustainable growth. DBP right now is the 6th largest bank in the Philippines in terms of asset size, and our strength as a development bank is on providing medium to long-term financing. For more than 7 decades, DBP has firmly supported the Philippine national government's development trusts with its unswerving efforts to promote growth in the strategic sectors. Let's go to the next slide. We focus on infrastructure and logistics, environmental responsibility and preservation, social services and community development, and micro, small, and medium enterprises. We also align our objectives. We aligned our objectives with the Philippine Development Plan from 2017 to 2022, which aimed to enhance the social fabric supported by the foundations of peace and security, strategic infrastructure development, safe and resilient communities, and ecological integrity, clean and healthy environment. We have available financing programs for energy projects, and these are the Financing Utilities for Sustainable Energy Development Program. We call it FUSed. Solar Merchant Power Plant Financing Program for power generators, the DBP SMPP, DBP's Electric Cooperative Loan Takeout Assistance from PISAM, and we call that Delta P, Energy Efficiency Savings Financing Program. This is our E2Save. And lastly, the Sustainable Waste Management for Enhanced Environmental Protection. We call it SWEEP. Let me share the details of each program. The Financing Utilities for Sustainable Energy Development Program, or the FUSE program, aims to provide financing support towards enhanced access to electricity services. By 2030, this program is expected to have funded at least 58 billion pesos of estimated investment for power generation, transmission, distribution, and retail electricity under the Philippine Energy Plan from 2020 to 2040. This program caters to private companies, transmission or distribution utilities, retail electricity suppliers, national government agencies, and even for local government units. DBP offers long-term financing of up to 15 years, and we give as much as 5 years grace period on principal, but it should always match the project and its development requirement. To date, the development contribution of the 92 borrowers assisted by DBP are as follows: 2,101 megawatt of additional generation capacity, consisting of 32 projects. We also have 287.50 MVA of additional substation capacity and 280.31 kilometer of transmission distribution lines, which were rehabilitated and expanded. We go now next to DBP SMPP to address the growing clamor to provide financing assistance to merchant power. DBP launched only last December 2021 the Solar Merchant Power Plant Financing Program, which is the first of its kind in the local banking industry. This program aims to support the attainment of the government's target of 35% renewable energy in the country's energy mix by 2030, in accordance with the Philippine Energy Plan. The program is expected to contribute to the government's goal of increasing solar photovoltaic capacity in the country from 2.16 gigawatts in 2020 to more than 15 gigawatts by 2030. Now, this program caters to the solar project developers who intend to sell the power generated to wholesale electric spot market, which we all know as WESM. Financial assistance covers capital expenditures of new solar merchant plants or reimbursement of eligible solar merchant plants. The next program is what we call Delta P. It aims to contribute to the continual improvement of electric cooperatives performance through loan takeouts from PSAM, in line with efforts to ensure adequate, affordable, and reliable supply of energy. As we all know, the corporate life of PSAM will end by 2026, and thus it can no longer extend long tenor loans of loan restructuring. So we crafted this program instead. The eligible borrowers under the program are electric companies with restructuring agreement or special payment arrangement with PSAM. The borrower must have a satisfactory record of at least 6 monthly consecutive payments with PSAM. The loanable amount under Delta P is up to 100% outstanding loan with PSAM, and we can give a tenor of up to 15 years. To date, this program has assisted 5 electric companies. The next program is what we call E2Save, which supports Republic Act 11285, or what we know as the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, that aims to institutionalize energy efficiency and conservation as a national way of life. This Renewable Energy Act is catered toward promoting the development utilization, and commercialization of renewable energy resources, such as rooftop solar technology. This program provides credit assistance to public institutions, private companies, and energy service companies or energy service providers. It also finances the preparation of investment grade or energy audit, but this is only available for public institutions such as the local government units. Now, to encourage investments in energy efficiency and renewable energy for own use or net metering for public institutions, the program can finance 100% of the acceptable total project cost or winning bid price, whichever is lower. And lastly, let me talk about DBP Sustainable Waste Management for enhanced environmental protection. This is our SWEEP program. This program supports the strict implementation of Republic Act 9003 and Republic Act 6969 to address the solid and hazardous waste management in the country. The program caters to public and private institutions engaged in solid and hazardous waste management and waste-to-energy projects. To encourage for public institutions, the program finances up to 100% of the total project cost. While for private companies, the maximum loanable amount is up to 70% of the validated total project cost. So those are the 5 programs that DBP offers to the public. In summary, the breadth and depth of our mandate as a financial institution places us in a pivotal position to significantly impact the environment through our investment and lending activities. As the country's premier development financial institution, DBP is strategically poised to influence its clients and other stakeholders to adopt sustainable business practices. DBP pushes for sustainable energy finance with focus on projects that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions, such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, electric vehicles, green buildings, and waste to energy. DBP's strategy for sustainable finance is the distinct push on rural electrification and renewable energy for increased access to electricity services and countryside development. Innovative financing for solar merchant is made available to help boost renewable energy development. Long-term financing is made available to support capital-intensive energy projects. DBP support is not only to large companies, for we also support SMEs. And DBP is your long-term partner in the energy sector. So in closing, we hope you will be with DBP as we support the country in meeting our sustainable goals in energy. That ends my presentation. Thank you for listening.
We are all aware that the country's energy sector is primarily driven by the private sector, with the government ensuring that the required policies, regulations, and incentives are in place. This synergy is important to ensure ease on the timely implementation of energy projects. So today we have invited one of our partners from the private sector to share with us their experience in investing in the energy sector. He holds a bachelor's degree in business management from Corporation.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr.
Okay,
Francis.
thank you. Oh, okay, Secretary Lotilia, ERC Chairperson Di Balanta, my friend Ed Francisco, other friends and colleagues in the energy industry, good morning. First, I'd like to thank the Department of Energy for inviting FirstGen to share our experience and perspective in today's Energy Investment Forum. To introduce myself, I'm Giles Puno, President of FirstGen, one of the leading private power producers in the country. Here is a quick snapshot of FirstGen. We own a unique portfolio of power plants with a total installed capacity of 3,500 megawatts, generating 1/5 or 20% of the Philippines' electricity supply. Through the years, we developed a distinct set of assets that utilize locally available, clean, low carbon, or renewable fuels. We are the largest in clean and flexible natural gas at 2,100 megawatts, fueled from Malampaya gas. And we are also the leader in 24-hour baseload renewable geothermal energy with 1,200 megawatts of plant capacity, located all over the country. We also own the Philippines' biggest wind farm at 150 megawatts, as well as several solar and hydroelectric power plants. In 2020, FirstGen recrafted its mission to help address the inequalities of climate change by forging collaborative pathways for a decarbonized and regenerative future. This is further concretized in our chosen path, centered on FirstGen's ability to accelerate and lead the transition towards decarbonizing the Philippine energy system. Through the years, we have strongly advocated for programs and a business model that would help address the existential threat of climate change. Our annual reports are used as a medium to communicate our climate concern. In 2016, we officially announced our firm commitment to not invest in coal because of its carbon emissions, its negative health impact, and the Philippines imports most of its coal supply anyway. We also wanted to avoid the risk of stranding investments. Today, we are investing in solutions that address energy security and energy transition for the country. FirstGen's 100 megawatt Aya pump storage project will be pioneering the latest variable speed technology, providing a faster response time and increased efficiency over a wide range of operations. We strongly support geothermal energy in the country's energy system, given its ability to supply 24/7 baseload renewable energy. We have lined up several expansion projects to grow our geothermal portfolio. And lastly, we are investing in an interim offshore terminal project in Batangas, which I will be talking more about later, to also address energy security and to complement the higher penetration of variable renewable energy with low carbon flexible natural gas technology. It pleases us to see this important movement to shift towards lower carbon emitting solutions gaining ground. We feel a real change in the tide with important stakeholders such as government, banks, investors, even our competitors making important announcements to support the reduction in carbon emissions, to stop building coal-fired plants, and to shift their investment priorities to favor renewables. We fully support the government's commitment to decarbonize, such as 1, the approval of the country's first nationally determined contribution, which aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 75% by 2030. 2, implementing and upholding DOE DOE's coal moratorium policy, and 3, supporting the clean energy transition through financial mechanisms like the Energy Transition Mechanism of the Asian Development Bank. President Marcos could not have said it any better in his first State of the Nation address. The president stressed his commitment to increase the use of the country's renewable energy sources, such as hydro, geothermal, solar, and wind. He acknowledged that the move to renewables will take time and highlighted the importance of natural gas to strengthen energy security, diversify the country's energy sources, and complement the entry of more renewable energy. Now, if we look at the clean energy scenario of DOE's Philippine Energy Plan, massive growth in investments will be required to address the country's energy needs from today to 2040, both in installed generating capacity and actual power to be generated from renewables, particularly solar, wind, and hydro. This is complemented by significant increases in flexible and low-carbon natural gas capacity and generation. This will require supporting policies and implementing rules and regulations to attract the large sums of capital from both equity and debt markets to address such a massive undertaking. Meanwhile, we will need to address the depleting natural gas supply from the Malampaya field. Total current production is less reliable and barely enough to provide sufficient fuel supply for FirstGen's 2,100 plus megawatts of gas plants today, out of the existing 3,500 megawatts of gas-fired power plants in the system. To address energy security, we urgently need more of both domestic and imported sources of natural gas supply. FirstGen, with our partner Tokyo Gas of Japan, is constructing an interim offshore terminal project. The project is estimated to cost about $300 million, not including the cost of the FSRU vessel, which will have a monthly fixed payment. Construction is in high gear to modify the existing jetty facilities in the FirstGen Clean Energy Complex in Batangas City, with the flexibility to continue importing liquid fuel supply and, more importantly, accommodate a floating storage regasification vessel that was chartered with the BW Group of Norway. The FSRU will provide LNG storage and regasification services to FirstGen's existing and planned gas-fired power plants, as well as other third-party terminal users. We expect to complete construction by the end of first quarter next year, while the BW Batangas FSRU vessel will arrive in the middle of next year. This LNG terminal allows for the early entry of LNG in the Philippines and addresses the country's energy security. This advances our long-term strategy for a full onshore terminal with the multi-purpose jetty and onshore gas receiving facility as necessary components. This can be pursued when demand for LNG supply grows. New businesses could also emerge from deploying small-scale LNG solutions to serve locations looking for alternatives to oil generation, as well as natural gas trading and distribution for utilities, and from beyond power applications. All these further strengthens the role of gas in advancing our pursuit for continued economic growth in a decarbonizing world. As you're aware, the global energy markets are unfortunately in turmoil. Triggered by the Russia-Ukraine war, energy commodity prices for oil, coal, and natural gas have surged this year, sending global energy industry players into a crisis and forcing many governments to intervene and take emergency steps to secure their energy supply, especially for the cold winter months. This is very much felt here in the country, resulting in increasing electricity costs as reflected in the elevated pricing in our electricity spot market and heightening pressure on energy players to deliver on their contractual obligations. On the flip side, the customers have now learned to appreciate the value of stable or predictable price contracts. Though this experience might be painful for some, we believe this is a learning experience that should not be wasted for the whole industry, that will pave the way for more balanced mechanisms to allocate risk. In addition, there are also adverse macroeconomic factors looming on the horizon, such as forex volatility, inflation and recession risks, and interest rate hikes that have material impacts on project development and operating and fuel costs, thereby affecting project returns. Let's also not forget that the pandemic is still creating supply chain bottlenecks that affect project timelines as well as escalate costs. Fortunately, the cost for First Gen to build the modified jetty and contract the FSRU vessel were locked in when the market was still favorable. Newer developments can no longer build on the same terms and costs. On top of these external and global factors, there are some headwinds ahead that we need to consider. First is the depleting Malampaya gas threatens the reliability of existing gas plants in the grid. This requires additional LNG infrastructure investments to build up more gas capacity as indicated in the Philippine Energy Plan. Second, deteriorating reliability of aging power plants causing price spikes from forced outages, with about 7,300 megawatts or 40% of Luzon's capacity aged 20 years and older. Needless to say, older plants that have not been maintained or operated properly become the subject of reliability issues. And then lastly, is the challenging investment environment resulting in underinvestment in the industry due to difficult to accept commercial terms in contracts and the lack of offtake support for critical large project investments. Encouraging investments without sacrificing consumer welfare requires a delicate balance. Contract terms that pass on as much risk to the power plant developers could backfire down the road, as it will make investing in new capacities less attractive from a risk and reward perspective. In turn, consumer welfare also suffers in the long run. Also, reviewing the criteria to qualify for CSPs will benefit the consumers, as it will enable plants that have high availability and reliability with cleaner generation to be able to join, regardless if they are existing or new. It is therefore important to look at the long-term objective of the country in terms of energy security, affordability, and decarbonization when looking for these win-win solutions. While our government with its Philippine Energy Plan is certainly moving in the right direction by pushing for more renewable energy complemented by cleaner and flexible natural gas, with the global energy crisis in place, the Philippines is actually in competition with other countries to build similar infrastructure and secure the necessary fuel supply for natural gas. In fact, we've seen in other countries like Germany and other European countries, the role of government is paramount in providing offtake assurance and support to navigate the complex commercial and financial structures needed to underpin large and critical project investments needed to enable the energy transition to succeed. These are investments such as the LNG terminals and transmission line upgrade, interconnection, and modernization projects. The path to a low-carbon Philippine energy future is clearly challenging. We need to accelerate the path towards decarbonization and ensure energy security at the same time. We have drawn up a list of some of the issues that need to be tackled. These include clarity on rules and policies for improved price signals, incentives for decarbonization and investments, and for market participants to be ready for further liberalization of the power markets. Allow me to elaborate. First, we think mechanisms have to be in place to be clear on price signals. Price caps in the WESM have distorted the market and prevented prices from signaling the need for new capacities of baseload, mid-merit to peaking generation. There is a need to incentivize investments in more supply, particularly for flexible complementary technologies. Accelerating the implementation of the reserve market, as practiced in other countries, is equally important to assure that adequate supply of reserves is readily available ahead of the time as the economy and the demand for power grows. This will enable the massive entry of intermittent renewables. Competitive offers for ancillary services are necessary to ensure competitive prices as opposed to direct negotiations. And full implementation of WESM in Mindanao will also be a welcome development. Secondly, as a country, let's make decarbonization happen quicker. Upholding the coal moratorium should be coupled with the organized and planned retirement of coal plants from the oldest and least efficient plants to the newest plants to allow a fair amount of time for capital recovery. As in other markets, a logical next step is to study and implement a mechanism for carbon pricing to address the distortion of the cost of externalities, such as carbon and other polluting emissions. A decarbonization program will ironically translate to the increased electrification of transport systems, such as mass transit and railroad systems, in addition to the shift from internal combustion to electric vehicles. This will require the nationwide build-out of fast charging stations for EVs. To strengthen commitment and alignment in the industry, it would help if the government would provide guidance on the decarbonization or emission targets. Third, let's continue to implement policies that promote investment. As a country with limited fossil fuel reserves, we should promote the build-out of renewables like solar, wind, hydro, and geothermal, which would also require timely enhancements and build-out in the connectivity of grid transmission lines. The DOE's recent initiative to grant preferential dispatch to geothermal is very much welcome. And thank you for that, Secretary Popo. This is the first significant and positive development for geothermal in a long time. So we are encouraged and emboldened to ask for a little bit more. We think significant incentives are still needed to promote investments in geothermal, given the difficulty and challenges in project development. But the benefits of having an indigenous, renewable, and baseload source of energy should be compelling. Geothermal expertise of the country is something that we have to be truly proud of because we have built it over time, thanks to the efforts made during the period of President Marcos Sr. Now would be a good time to continue to nurture and grow this valuable resource. Critical projects that ensure the reliability and affordability of power should also be given proper offtake support or adequate financial assurance. Energy mix for DUs and ECs, as well as increased efficiency of PSA approval process, could further promote needed investments to support a growing economy. Lastly, let's continue to build on the success of expanding the retail market. Fast-tracking retail competition open access to reduce power producers' dependence on DOs and ECs will provide alternatives to some of the difficult commercial terms we currently see in recent CSP biddings. It will also give retail consumers the ability to choose where they choose their electricity supply from. To conclude, while we might find the energy industry caught in the middle of a gloomy storm, we should not lose sight of the long-term goals of the energy transition and energy security. That means being prepared for any kind of scenario to play out as energy markets go through its cycles. What is important is that we as a country continue to build the right capabilities and invest in optionality and flexibility so the country stays resilient and energy secure even with the presence of external shocks. We at FirstGen are ready to do our part to collaborate with government and other stakeholders to find a complete, comprehensive solution to the energy security and energy transition issues that the country is facing. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Francis Giles Puno. Our next speaker also holds a master's and undergraduate degrees in philosophy from the Ateneo de Manila University. He also took up Bachelor of Laws and finished strong as cum laude from the University of the Philippines. He is also an alumnus of Harvard University. He also practiced law in the firms of Romulo Mabata, Buenaventura Sayok in Los Angeles, and Puyat Jacinto and Santos, where he specialized in energy and project finance. He is currently the Executive Director and Head for Commercial Operations at ACEN Corporation. Now let us all welcome Attorney Miguel De Jesus of ACEN Corporation.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Maxine, for the kind introduction. DOE Secretary Popo Rotilla, USEC Wimpy Fuentevella, USEC Alessandro Sales, ERC Chairperson Mona Dimalanta, BOI Director Raquel Echage, other executives of the DOE, ERC, and BOI, fellow speakers and partners in the energy sector, a pleasant morning to all of you. It's an honor to be given the opportunity to speak with you this morning. I would like to structure my talk in 5 parts. First, I will introduce you to ACEN Corporation, which I represent. Second, I will share 4 of our projects in the Philippines. Third, I will briefly highlight a few key challenges of development in the Philippines. Fourth, I will speak on 3 key programs of government which support the development of renewable energy projects. And finally, I will introduce you to our foray into retail energy. Over the last few years, ACEN has benefited from the vision and guidance of our leaders in the Ayala Group, strategic partnerships here and abroad, and industry reforms in the Southeast Asian region. From a relatively modest investment in Northwind, equivalent to only 16 megawatts in 2010, we are now close to having in operation 4,000 megawatts, well on our way to hitting our initial target of 5,000 megawatts by 2025. In September this year, we decided to target a bolder aspiration of 20 gigawatts by 2030. This vision is driven not only by what we have accomplished thus far, but also by our belief that renewable energy is the future. Today, renewable energy accounts for 87% of ACEN's net attributable capacity. In October of last year, we announced our commitment to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. This required us to explore the retirement of our remaining coal plant, South Luzon Thermal Energy Corporation, or SLTEC, by 2040, well in advance of its useful life. Following a framework set by the ADB and with the support of key lenders BPI and RCBC, we adopted an energy transition framework that sees us divesting our stake in SLTEC and using the proceeds to reinvest in new renewable energy plants, while still ensuring the plant's retirement. While the Philippines remains our priority market, we also took advantage of opportunities in the region, such as in Vietnam, where feed-in tariff programs were rolled out shortly after the Philippines, or where the retirement of coal facilities created opportunities for renewable energy development, such as in Australia. Today, we are present in Vietnam, Australia, India, and Indonesia. Having said that, the bulk of our 2030 target continues to be focused on our home market, the Philippines. To date, we have 1,600 megawatts of capacity in the country, of which more than 1,000 megawatts come from solar and wind power. Coming to the second part of my talk, let me highlight a few of these key renewable energy facilities. The North Wind project in Bangi, Ilocos Norte went online in 2005. It's the first wind farm in Southeast Asia with an iconic single row of wind turbines stretching along the 9-kilometer shoreline of Bangi Bay. ASEN made an equity investment in 2010, when it was still a 33-megawatt wind farm. This first foray was therefore actually an investment into a brownfield or existing project. We added an additional 18 megawatts to Northwind a few years later as part of the feed-in tariff or FIT program of the DOE in 2014. Our first greenfield project was the 81 megawatt North Luzon Renewables Wind Farm in Pagudpod, Ilocos Norte, which was also built pursuant to the FIT program. This was an ambitious project because it required, among others, that a 60-kilometer transmission line be erected all the way from Pagudpod to Ilocos with a very tight timeline driven by the FIT deadline. For a first greenfield project, that was a daunting task. Fortunately, we were able to successfully commission the project in time for the FIT and now have under development an additional 240 megawatts in the neighboring barangays. In 2016, we commissioned our first solar farm, Montesol, in Bais, Negros Oriental. It was a small project of only 18 megawatts. It was also built in view of the FIT and with the FIT program for solar, which followed that for wind. Despite its modest size, this project reaped significant gains. First, it got us comfortable with solar technology, which has driven our growth over the last few years. And second, it allowed us to partner with Bronze Oak Philippines, which we later acquired and which has become our greenfield development arm. Notably, all these first three projects were developed with a view of the feed-in tariff program. In the last few years, project costs have come down and now allowed us to be bolder and to build on a merchant basis, meaning we built the projects without a back-to-back long-term offtake contract from day one. Thus far, we have commissioned on a merchant basis around 220 megawatts of renewable capacity. The next 3 years hope to bring online close to 1,000 more megawatts. I'll speak later on our view of why we're comfortable doing this when conventional wisdom would dictate otherwise. The biggest of our operating merchant facilities is what you see on your screens, the 120 megawatt Alaminos solar farm in Laguna, which houses in the same complex a 60 megawatt hour battery energy storage system, which was built to support ancillary requirements of the grid. Coming to the third part of this talk, our journey from 0 to 4,000 megawatts was not devoid of challenges, and some of these continue to be hurdles to renewable energy development to this day. Let me mention 3. First, renewable energy plants require substantial land to be built. This does not only apply to solar farms, which require about a hectare for each megawatt, but also to wind farms, whose turbines need to be sufficiently spaced. Our largest solar farm in Vietnam occupies an area roughly the size of BGC, and our 81 megawatt NLR wind farm in Ilocos is actually built over a 700-hectare forest land use agreement. Thus, the first challenge is finding these large contiguous tracts of reasonably priced land where wind and solar resources are good. Our land team and land aggregation efforts thus form a significant part of our development strategy. To keep our growth trajectory, we have, like many other developers, started to look to alternatives to ground-mounted installations, and thus have in our pipeline floating solar installations and offshore wind projects. While these two technologies are proven, we need significant scale and reasonable assumptions on offtake to ensure that they remain competitive. The second challenge is that solar and wind farms are often located in remote areas of the Philippines where the national grid may not have robust transmission facilities. As mentioned, when we built our wind farm in Pagudpod, Ilocos Norte, we had to construct a 60-kilometer transmission line through mountainous areas to get to the closest substation in Lawag. The National Grid Corporation has a robust transmission development plan that they will need to aggressively implement. to help ensure that we will have the infrastructure for all these renewable energy projects. Private developers like us believe that it is necessary to advance costs, even of transmission assets, to ensure the successful rollout of our plants. As you must all know, the permitting requirements of power plants from all levels of government, national and local, can oftentimes result in delays in the development of facilities. Thankfully, the DOE has introduced the EVOS, or Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop system, which is designed to expedite approvals and consolidate permitting. The system is a step in the right direction, and our hope is that more agencies and permits can be integrated into this. Coming to the fourth part of my talk, notwithstanding these challenges, we see great potential in continuing to invest in renewable energy. Let me focus specifically on offtake opportunities. As mentioned, while we have opted to develop projects on a merchant basis, the long-term view has not been to rely solely on the wholesale electricity spot market, or WESM. Instead, we have looked to leveraging on government programs supportive of RE development. Let me mention three. First, we look forward to the full implementation of the Renewable Portfolio Standards, or RPS, as part of the DOE's plan to achieve 35% renewable energy share by 2030. RPS ensures that there's a guaranteed demand for renewable energy by creating a market for renewable energy certificates, or RECs, which distribution utilities and suppliers may procure to comply with their mandated renewable energy mix. These RECs are effectively green certificates. We have seen how in other jurisdictions there's a market for these RECs, even for commercial and industrial customers keen on greening their portfolios. Second, we are equally excited about the Green Energy Auction Program, or GEAP. The DOE successfully facilitated the first green energy auction in June of this year, where we were fortunate enough to win 2 long-term contracts for our wind plants. The auction benefits greenfield RE developers by providing them with long-term contracts up to 20 years, while simultaneously helping distribution utilities comply with their RE requirements. We understand and hope that the program will be held on an annual basis, which should enable the development of more renewable energy facilities. Our only suggestion would be to ensure that more stringent guidelines be set to ensure that participants have sufficient resources and the ability to deliver. Otherwise, the auction may promote hyper-aggressiveness during bidding, but result in non-delivery. Another welcome development is the Green Energy Option Program, or GEOP, which is the expansion of retail electricity to 100 kilowatt customers who opt to source their energy from renewable energy sources. Our retail arm, ASEN Renewable Energy Solutions, or ASEN-RES, which holds a GEOP license, is working doubly hard to encourage more and more eligible customers to switch to renewable energy as part of this program. Fortunately, we find that this program is coinciding with customers' preference. According to a 2021 research conducted by Synergy Market Research and YouGov, 77% of Philippine customers believe that renewable energy is the future, and 60% are even willing to pay more for renewable energy. While it is true that conventional fuels still make up the bulk of the energy mix and are critical for energy security, especially in the near to mid-term, we believe that it's only a matter of time for renewables, as is evidenced by this market sentiment. Earlier this month, we reintroduced our retail arm as a GEOP provider and launched a campaign to help promote renewable energy. Before I end my talk, and with your indulgence, please allow me to flash a short 90-second video which captures the narrative of how nature, symbolized by the glow of fireflies, can sustainably power homes and businesses. So let's see that video, please.
When the future seems dark, nature lights the way, leading us to a new revolution. Where we harness renewable energy from the force of the wind and the rays of the sun. To power your dreams, your work, your life. So take charge and ignite change. Choose what's good for you, for them, for a sustainable future. Choose renewable energy. Ace and Rest, a force for nature.
Thank you. I hope that gives you a glimpse into how we are imagining our shared obligation of nature building and how our massive renewable energy development initiative needs to echo at the end user level in small businesses and hopefully at some point even in households. On that note, let me end this talk and thank you all very much for your attention. Once again, good morning, everyone.
Thank you, Attorney De Jesus. May I just remind everyone that it is necessary to fill out the evaluation form to acquire access to the presentation materials and certificate of appearance. However, materials such as issuances are readily available on the platform. All the information from the presentations of our resource speakers might be a bit overwhelming. So let us all take a break and relax our minds because for sure, the listing that you wanted is to miss our presentations in the afternoon session. Let us all be back before 1 p.m. Enjoy your lunch, everyone, wherever you are.